Let my CPU cool down. Wow. Okay, well, we're at 60 frames per second. We are streaming. Yeah, I'm using 25% of my CPU at the moment. Everything is looking smooth here. And would you give us some sound check, PC? Well, hold on. Don't do it yet.
Sure.
Let me put
Don't
my
do it
headphone in
yet.
so I can monitor. Or you can talk. I'm not ready yet.
Okay. So, it's
Just
a
being very
interesting day.
paranoid about our
I,
sound not getting cut out.
well, if you're trying to talk and they can't hear you, then there is a situation that you just can't like
Okay, yeah, it's
overcome.
working. Sounds good, actually.
Okay, good. All right. So we're keeping the Article 5 alive.
Okay, sorry I couldn't, or I was hearing you on a strong delay, but now I'm back on the chat
The
head, or
regular.
yeah, the actual
Yeah.
headphones.
So yeah, we're here keeping the Article 5 alive, right? On
Yes.
3/28, 2021.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I should have said this before we actually started. I guess we're still haven't officially started yet, but that should be our sign
Okay.
off. If one of us says "Keep hope alive," then the other one responds with Article 5,
Okay.
and then that's how we know we're ending.
Okay. I'll try to remember that. You may
Okay.
have to, it's been a while since I've like done any theater.
Oh,
It's the
yeah.
same thing. It's a cue. It's a cue
Yes.
type of thing. Yeah. Yes, of course I did theater.
I didn't know that. I'm not surprised,
But
but
not real theater.
mhm.
Yes. I mean, just like in high school and, and community and stuff
Mhm.
like that. You know what I mean? Nothing fabulous. Although I did play. I did try. The camera doesn't love me.
Uh I I'm sure your charisma carries though.
No, no, it doesn't. See, that's the problem. No, I tried. I've tried to be an extra many times. The camera doesn't love me. I even, I lived at a place. So they made a movie, which has actually become sort of a cult movie
Mhm.
at a place that I lived.
Mhm.
hmm And I didn't, and people there got picked to be in the movie, and I didn't. Do you get what I'm saying here?
What
So
movie?
it's called The Stuntman. I
Ah.
think Peter O'Toole is in it.
Hmm.
I think Peter O'Toole is in it.
Why you're such a Peter O'Toole fan?
Well, I mean, I I knew of him. I mean, he was sort of one of the guys. It was who would it be now? I mean, you guys would probably think it'd be like, well, I don't want to say Ben Affleck or, but more I'm thinking Matt Damien on
More
Good
prestige
Will
actor
Hunting.
type.
No, like more what is setting the tone of the time. Like Good Will Hunting was a real, for one, that was the first real deviation I think that uh, Robin Williams did from comedy in a movie was Good Will Hunting, and that is not, you know,
Mhm.
that subject matter was not comedic at all. Do you know the movie?
Oh yeah.
Okay, I figured you did. So
Yeah. Well, we are dropping frames again all of a sudden for some reason. It's really pissing me off because I hate looking at the stream and seeing it like stuttering around.
are you sure it's just because you haven't refreshed? I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, I think it's because
Twitch freezes all the time for me,
I think
all
it's
the
because I
time.
had Twitch open on my computer also. If I just watch it on my phone, yeah, okay, that seems to be better.
I don't know what it is like that when I said about Twitch. I do have a lot of trouble. But anyway, do we want to kind of start?
Yeah, yeah.
We're kind of rambling on today. You're going to have a lot of cutting out to do.
That's all right.
We're just trying
I
to
don't
make
want
it
to cut
one.
stuff. I want to,
Oh,
we'll leave it all, I think.
okay. They'll just hear us ramble on.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be frames dropping and stuff. It's mostly audio, anyways, so it's all good. Okay, shall I read Article
Yes,
5?
because we're keeping the Article 5 alive.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm not even going to pull it up on the screen actually because I know that is going to cause the thing to jump. So I'm just going to pull it up on my phone here.
And any of you in the chat, you can find one if you want, real quick, I'm sure, if you want to read along.
Yep. Article 5 of the Constitution. Okay. Oh, great. This website just gives me all the interpretations, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Here we go. One long run-on sentence, as we know. And I'll read it in my best vocal fry voice. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or, on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution, when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, or by conventions in 3/4 thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by Congress, provided that no amendment which may be made prior to the year 1808 shall in any manner affect the first and fourth clauses in the 9th section of the first article, and that no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. I want to get it memorized, hopefully soon.
Yeah, it's a hard one because it don't flow at all. It's kind of like I feel they were pressed into service. Those words.
Oh,
Like literally pressed into service because they didn't really want to write them, the framers.
yeah, that
Not
needs to
all of
be.
them.
We need to research more, like who proposed it, who really pushed for
Well,
Article 5. I guess
we
Hamilton we
thought we
know,
knew
right?
Hamilton. We did know that he did, but we thought that he was dead. But I don't think he was dead. So he might have been the one who put it in or fought for it to the point. We
Mm-hmm.
always thought it was because Madison he died and Madison put it in as some requiem. Is that what it is? A requiem almost like some kindness to him, some memorial to him, you know?
He,
No, I don't know.
I don't, I don't think he died
That's what
before.
I had heard that see, that's what I had heard.
Hold
I
on.
didn't say it was true.
Yeah, let's check that real quick. I'm just looking up. Did Hamilton sign the Constitution? Because I thought he was a signer, right?
Mm, I don't know what happened with all that, but it seemed like he died in 1808. No, yeah, he was like in his 40s. His son had already died in a duel. His son was in his 20s.
Yeah, Alexander Hamilton signs the Constitution September
Okay.
17th, 1787.
Okay.
Delegate from New York. Uh,
One
while
of the four
Alexander,
new states.
let me just read this part real quick. It might be interesting. While Alexander Hamilton had serious doubts about many aspects of the Constitution, once he put his signature on the document, he threw himself wholeheartedly into the battle for ratification, along with James Madison and John Jay. He wrote the 85 essays arguing for ratification that have been known as the Federalist Papers. Jay wrote 5 of the essays, Madison 29, and Hamilton, always deft with a pen and an argument, wrote the remaining 51. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Well,
So we should definitely read the 85th 85th article of Federalist paper,
uh-huh.
because that's where he talks about the Article 5, about why you should have the Article 5. I thought, right?
Oh, I guess also here, regarding the consensus amendment process crafted during the convention, James Madison, writing in the Federalist number 43, declared it guards equally against that extreme facility which would render the Constitution too mutable, and that extreme difficulty which might perpetuate its discovered faults. So he declared, yeah, it's
Yeah,
right
that's
there
what
in the
he
middle.
says. That's what he says. He says.
Right after the fact,
That's what
after
it
he.
says.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I mean, I just think Madison had more of an idea of not wanting to have too much fiddled with the Constitution, but by making a Supreme Court the way that they did, they knew that they were stacking the deck. Okay,
Mm.
and this is why I know this now. And I had heard it. I had heard it in a documentary, and I decided I would see it in print so I could get my own sources.
Mm-hmm.
The French Revolutions, one of the major causes of the French Revolution had to do a lot with the judicial system of France. It wasn't just that they were mad at the king,
Mm-hmm.
they were angry because the wealthy could do anything they wanted, the aristocrats,
Mm-hmm.
and nothing would happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
But the people, regular, every average working people, would be, tortured and killed
Mm-hmm.
in public.
What does that remind you of? The two-tiered
Where we
justice
are
system.
today,
Mm-hmm.
where we are today,
Yep.
yes.
You got a justice
So
system for the
that's
rich and
why I say,
powerful, and a justice system for everybody else, or an injustice system
so
for everybody else.
by giving the Supreme Court, he should have made the Article 5 easier for the people to
Mm-hmm.
get an amendment through.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I tell you that he chose to
Mm-hmm.
do the way of power that he did.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to confirm that about that the judicial system of France,
Mm-hmm.
which is what's happening sort of almost in America, and we don't talk about it, where that it's becoming when you pass it on from one generation to another. When, like your dad is a judge, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore
Oh, right.
you're a judge.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we basically have two Supreme Court justices right now, which are second generation justices,
I did.
Gorsuch
Oh, yeah.
and Kavanaugh.
They're
Gorsuch and Kavanaugh.
they had parents who were
Their
justices.
parents are judges, not on the Supreme Court
Oh.
necessarily, but they're justices. Do you get what I'm saying?
Uh
Is
huh.
that it becomes where that Well, then what? Well, of course your children will make it to the Supreme Court because you got it there. And one of them was a woman.
Hmm.
So that's Gorsuch. And he was talking about his mother when he was doing his deal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I couldn't really stand to listen to him, but
I mean, well, I think you're absolutely right about the two-tiered justice system being uh, such an egregious violation of justice. You know that it's when it gets so obvious that that's something that will make people
and
desperate for
it's not just
change.
the Supreme Court. It's the way of which all the court in a way that they set it up.
Right. It trickles down or trickles up, either both ways. The power protects
Well,
power, pretty
yes,
much.
and well, and
And I don't even know how, like, what
judges are
amendment.
not
Hmm.
considered to be judges don't run on progressive liberal platforms, do they? Like, let's say, hey, I'm going to let everybody out of jail. What if I get to be a judge? You going to vote for me?
Hmm.
Are you going to uh, appoint me for life? If I'm going to say, hey, make me a Supreme Court justice so I can blow up the system, you think
Hmm.
that's going to happen?
Well, and that's not their job. I mean, they're
Well, in a way,
supposed
it
to.
is because the judges are supposed to pick how things, how. Okay, then let's talk about Roe versus Wade.
Hmm.
Wade, let's talk about it like seriously, like that, in the sense of if they are not to make like the law of the land, then what is that? Okay,
Well, they're not supposed to
and it's
make the law of the land. They judge whether or not the laws passed by Congress are constitutional.
but obviously, and that's not altogether true. Was it a
Well, and
federal ban
and they
or was
also
it just all 50 states banned abortion? I didn't think there was a
well
federal
they also decide
ban.
cases, so they create precedents. So in that Roe versus Wade case, they they decided, who would win that, court case, and then therefore that decision is precedent for all lower courts, and therefore it's essentially a law. So it's like, I think it was a good it would have been a good piece of legislation, but as a court case, it doesn't really carry
But
enough
this is
water,
what,
basically.
okay. And my point being,
Hmm.
when you make the judicial system the way that the framers, founders,
Hmm.
white supremacists did, ah, when they wrote the Constitution, they were already stuck in the deck against keeping things more progressive,
Hmm.
taking to me more of the lid off of the boiling
Hmm.
water.
Well, I think they thought that they were doing a good job of setting up a great system, and they thought, well, we don't want it to change too much too fast, because then it could, you know, I think they were saying we're setting this up so that it'll last a long time. But if people turn up the heat too much with too much progress, to use your boiling pot metaphor, then it can get out of hand.
Well, right, and they already knew that it was already heating up because
Hmm.
slavery was an issue when they did the
Hmm.
Constitution, and everybody defends them like, well, we couldn't have afforded to just, better to have just divided then. Let the South have
Mm,
frickin' gone their way.
no,
And
no,
the North would have made sure every slave that wanted to get out of there would find a way.
I know you're not
We would have,
serious about that. I mean, come on. That's
I, what? That I would change history like that? Absolutely.
what?
Let the South do it. Oh no! Oh! You can't! You can't! You can't! Your heart is what is it like? And women would have the vote? Oh no! And the indigenous people would be able to vote too? Oh, we
What
couldn't
in the
change history
North?
like
You
that.
think they would have just women and all other minorities would have just been equal citizens right away if it wasn't for the South? I don't know.
No, I don't think it was just the South, but I think that the North would have had a much easier time of going with a lot more progress.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure, yeah.
Because,
But then we would just have
and
this. We would have just had a fascist dictatorship right on our southern border that we would have had to contend with all the way through. And who knows if they would have. I mean, there's a certain
okay,
like
okay.
there's a certain
You,
power that comes along
Madison
with
is from
authoritarian rule and having like a slave army. You know, they could have taken over the North with that sort of authoritarianism. Also, it's not guaranteed that the North would have won the inevitable war that would have happened if the South had had hundreds of years on their own to develop a nation and an army. When they eventually would have clashed, it might not have gone the
well,
way it
true.
did.
They would have had the money to start out with, so the North would have had to immediately figure out what they were going to do.
Well,
Now, the other thing though is that okay, was slavery then just economic? Because if it was not just economic in the sense of the plantation, then how does it spread to places, okay, like in Arizona, that it didn't, wouldn't it, I don't think it would have worked in Arizona. What do you think the South would have just gone for all the territory it could gobble up and hope that they could just enslave people to do it? I mean, the rest of the world
sure.
was already deciding slavery was not not a go. The rest of the world is looking at slavery and they're not doing. They're not. It's not going well for them. Like France,
Hmm. And so
you
you
know
think
that's
the rest of the world would have just boycotted the cheap cotton and cheap tobacco coming out of the South just because they were against slavery? And eventually
the Manchester
economic
will
pressure would have.
the Manchester the people who made the thread in Manchester, the workers had already decided that before the Civil War, it just happened that the Civil War started, that they were no longer going to do any cotton from the South that
Hmm.
was picked by slaves. Yes, I do. I do think the world would have put so much pressure on the South within another 100 years
Hmm.
that they would have no longer, it would have no longer been tenable for them to continue with it. And the North would have been, and then,
Well, I mean,
so,
this hypothetical, obviously, we can't say what would have happened. You know,
but you just can't believe that I could dream
yeah, I don't know.
such a thing.
I wouldn't change history that way. We've talked before about an interesting idea for our science fiction movie or show or book or whatever, where the South won the Civil War, uh, or basically where basically the states stayed split. Or you could write it like you said, like where they never were a united country in the first place,
Right. I
and
mean,
play it
it's
out
not
like
any,
Man in the High Castle
right.
style. I think it's an interesting discussion, but I don't know. Let's talk more about how Article
Well,
Five.
if you're saying
Mm-hmm.
that you thought that there would be a fascist government on the authoritarian slave state
Mm-hmm.
South, then who is writing the Constitution? Madison? Where is he from? Virginia. And
Mm-hmm.
he is a slave owner.
Mm-hmm.
And Jay, I believe Jay is also a slave owner.
Okay. And
Hamilton was
Washington
the
was
only
too.
one.
So which side would Washington have gone with? You know, and Jefferson.
Well, because they were in Virginia, they would have probably gone to the South.
Hmm.
They probably would have. And what it was is that we were concerned more about Britain taking us over again.
Hmm.
Do you see? We just fought the Revolutionary War.
Right.
We can't seem to get our shit together. People aren't happy. Our economy sucks because
Yeah,
we're all just these independent little
see,
things
and that's
that.
another wrinkle there. What if that would have happened? If the South would have been separated, the British Crown might have just come right back over and been able to, take one and then take the other. Made a deal with the South and taken back the North, and then later taken back the South, or not, or who knows.
I don't know.
If the
And
or
but I kind of
if the
feel like
British
if that was
Crown
going to happen,
if the British Crown would have
what?
been able to keep slaves, in the South, but kind of keep their hands off it with, I mean, I don't know. They're not
That's
they're
a
not
that's a
too
that's a
progressive. The British monarchy, we know that now. So I mean, uh, who knows if they would have ever gotten so abolitionist. But anyways, I mean, I think we still at this
But I just
in.
feel that the Article 5 is for that. I just think that the way that they did our judicial system
Hmm.
is also an impediment to sort of getting Article 5 through in
Hmm.
some, the Article 5 amendments done by the state legislators, the people in the states who go to their state legislators to say, I want to have a Article 5 convention on this amendment,
Well,
on the amendment that
I think a
would
really good
legalize pot.
um, a really good amendment that we could do would be term limits for Supreme Court justices, and make them be democratically elected. Make it so that, the justices have to actually campaign and get a popular vote
No,
and have a 4 year or 8 year term.
no.
Why?
You become a Supreme Court justice on a lottery system. And I don't
That's
care
a
if you're
I
not
think that's a good
voting.
idea too. I actually really think that's actually a
You're
really
just
good idea.
a person. You're a person, and you just
Hmm.
got to go and fulfill your time, and you get sort of taught. And we
Actually,
can
that's a
decide how
and
often we want that to be.
make it like a lot bigger. Maybe make it be like 50 people or 100 people or something. Not, make it like the Senate, like two from every state, and it's a lottery. I think that would be an interesting, you know.
I wish
But
I could hear the popping of right wing fascist
mhm,
heads right now that I would
mhm.
say such a thing, right?
Well, I mean, supposedly they liked the idea of term limits. I don't know if they like the idea of term limits for Supreme Court now that they've got their majority firmly enshrined. They probably don't want to give that up, but they want term limits for Congress. So I think they'd have a hard time arguing that they shouldn't have term limits on the Supreme Court.
They say that, but as far as I know, it's been challenged before. The legal argument against why you can't have term limits because they're elected. Supposedly, we have term limits on the president because he's not elected. He's done. It's done by an electoral college, which is not the same as a one-to-one vote, as a representation. Which is the other thing of I really got to look more into the electoral college. I don't know what drugs they were on to come up with a thing like that, but they were definitely doing too much of it.
Hmm. Well, they didn't
It
want it
makes
to be a
no
direct.
sense.
They didn't want it to be a direct democracy. Another thing I think Article 5 would be great to amend uh, the electoral college system. Just say the president shall be elected by national popular vote. Period. You know, and that could be a great 28th Amendment. Just get rid of the electoral college that way. I mean, you and I have talked about that state compact that would get rid of the electoral college by just
But you
enough.
need as many of them to do it as you do for an Article 5 convention call. From what we
Um,
did the math on, I thought, like, be,
well, it depends on which states, because,
You
states
did,
have,
but
you just
you
need
don't
enough.
get Florida and you don't get Texas and
Yeah,
you don't get like the ones that we're saying that
I see
wouldn't
what you're
go for
saying. Yeah.
certain Article 5.
Uh-huh.
Okay?
Who
So
the
when
ones
it
who
all
actually
comes
would go
down
for it?
to
You could do the math where you would
so
do it
you
with
so
less, but
you
yeah.
you maskers, you maskers, that's all you are. You got on some kind of freaking mask that makes you appear like you're not an Article 5 convention caller, but you
Hmm.
are. You just want to circumvent the Constitution altogether, which makes you way even more bizarre than anybody else
Yeah.
I know.
I mean, I'm still for it personally, just because I think it's the sort of thing where it's just a matter of power. Do you have the power to do this? Will it work even if it's bending the rules? I say then go for it, because we don't have, the luxury of doing everything by the book. So,
I sort of get that, but it's
mhm.
just like to come out with this is like to me like, well, how come you just didn't go along with what supposedly is easier? But
Uh-huh.
and they, but it seems like with certain calls for Article 5 conventions, certain states sign on. So you get this like momentum going with it for a while, perhaps,
Hmm.
whatever the Article 5 is. And there have been, to our listeners, we have no idea how many there are because they're started in states and they don't keep track of them and they get rid of them and they do all kinds of crap with them. Okay.
Hmm.
So you want to know about it? You can spend your life research doing
There's
that and give
hundreds.
us that
There's at least
information.
600, right? I mean,
At least, but we
yeah.
think there could be thousands.
Hmm.
I mean, there's nothing to, I mean, you can just do an amendment to the Constitution for anything that you
Hmm.
want, like we have to start, we could make it an amendment that every house has to recapture the rainwater. That's an amendment to the, we can make it, just like you said, not everything should be an amendment to the Constitution, but everything could be an amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah.
There is a difference, right?
Well,
So,
hmm
whatever anybody wants to get on their horse about and thinks they can push, at least in one state,
the
that
one
we have no idea.
the one that
Right.
I think is timely right now is repeal the Second Amendment, and that's not going to get any love from people we disagree with. But obviously, the Second Amendment is being completely abused. Either repeal it or amend it to say, the what is it called, regulation, what do they say, a well-regulated militia, take that clause and flesh it out in another amendment and saying, well, this is what a militia means, this is what well-regulated means, etc. That could all be done, and you could, I think that should absolutely be spelled out, because people have abused it, and the whole history of that, of, I guess, it's Supreme Court decisions saying what, shall not be infringed means. They just took shall not be infringed and just made that the entire thing and said no regulations, period. Obviously, there are some regulations against, like, RPGs and nuclear bombs and stuff, but it, you know the whole shall not be infringed part and well regulated part are contradictory. So there should be some kind of thing. And so how would that be done? I mean, if 2/3 of states called for an amendment to amend the Second Amendment, Congress would have to act. I mean, they're not doing it now. They're not. There's too many. All these southern, or I say southern, but all these, because we're talking about the Civil War, but all these pro Second Amendment states are never going to. Their representatives in Congress are never going to allow for gun reform. Uh, you know, so we need to force them somehow. And if they see that, okay, they're coming for the entire Second Amendment, they're either going to repeal the entire Second Amendment and take away all guns, or we can pass some common sense gun reform, and maybe we could get change that way. And that's the
I
whole,
don't
that's how
know.
Article 5 is
I don't
designed to
know.
be used, right?
Yes. Yes, it is. Um, because the majority of people in the majority of states, it's not like people in Kentucky
Mm-hmm.
want to have some regulation on guns. It
Mm-hmm.
may not be much, but I think they want some. And as Americans continue to kill at will, and no one is safe anywhere
Mm-hmm.
because someone can just have a gun that or mini guns and all loaded and cocked and ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, supermarkets are supposed to be the safe place. Like
And
I live in a
schools.
bubble where I am. Yeah, but I mean like yeah, uh, the area of the country that I live in, the patch of mine has been very safe. I live in a bubble and I think I'm privileged.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea how privileged I am. I am very concerned that that privilege will end very quickly because
Mm-hmm.
we have no idea when anybody will decide that they want to do these mass killings anymore and who they'll target. I mean, that's really the bottom line.
Right.
So now, just as a total, um, my, so now people in the United States, everyone just in the United States, period, doesn't matter if you're a citizen or anything. Just means if you are standing on the patch of the United States, you're not safe anymore. You're not safe from anybody, from other people anymore. Someone can just come and kill you
Mm-hmm.
for no reason, not because you've done anything.
I mean,
That's how bad it's gotten, really. And when
unfortunately, there's a whole portion of this country that unless something personally affects them, they just don't see it as a problem.
I mean, I just went shopping this morning in a sort of an affiliate of the store that the guy got in. You know what I mean? It just happened there. Do I think it could have happened there? Well, yeah, I do. But do I think it has just as likely as to happen at a Walmart or
Mm-hmm.
an Albertsons or a Rayleigh's or a Walgreens or a
Mm-hmm.
CVS anymore? Or maybe hell, it'll be the fucking farmers markets next, right? I mean,
God forbid.
geez.
I mean, nothing. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
There
There
is
is no
what did
safe.
you just say? Only the goddess can forbid that, but no,
Well,
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. You know what I'm kidding.
I
God,
know.
yes, that should be forbidden. Totally. That
Well,
could
and I
happen.
mean, are people ever going to get sick and tired enough to where they demand change? And if they are, how are they going to demand that change? Because what are you going to do? Just
Well,
start
that's what
signing
it is.
petitions that are it's
Well,
already
that's
like 80% of the country, agrees that there should be common sense reform. What is it? 90%
at
want
least
cannabis
background
legalized.
checks. They want background
Yeah,
checks.
common
That's
sense
what, like
background checks,
85% of the people want background checks. And the biggest thing, and this is where the biggest pushback is from domestic violence stuff, because
exactly.
those are the people who should not have guns.
Mhm.
They should not have guns.
For sure. And but like once 80% of the country wants it, once 90% of the country wants some reform of some kind, and the Congress isn't giving it to them, there's no action. How do they make it happen? Because you can sign petitions and call and write letters to your legislators till you're blue in the face, but until you do something with actual teeth, it's obviously not going to change. Nothing's going to happen. So, what do you do? Well, the Constitution lays out a clear path forward for you. in Article 5. And anyone who's out there saying, "Oh, but Article 5 can't be used those for that because, you know, what? Because then an amendment's going to they're going to completely change the Constitution and what? And allow more guns or outlaw more drugs than they already do? Like, it can't get any worse." So,
Well, and once again, everybody thinks it's the boomers, and it's not the boomers. It's that silent, or what's the other, what else are they called?
yeah, the
The
silent
silent
generation.
generation.
Hmm.
But you said they were called something else besides that. The
Oh,
ones that are,
yeah, I forget.
they're the ones that are in power. I mean, Trump was so close to it, he probably just missed it by a couple of months or something. I mean, he's born in 1946, like in
Hmm.
March. So, I mean, like, see what I'm saying? So, it's not just the Dems, it's the Republicans too. I don't get this. I don't get this love of, you know, like Dianne Feinstein. I mean, I can't even imagine that people would have voted for someone sort of that age. And I don't mean to be an ageist either, but
Hmm.
it's a demanding job, and you have to kind of be running on all your cylinders, honey.
Hmm.
That's sort of what you agree to when you run for office. That, it's, of course, it's turned out that they're not like Reagan, the God Reagan.
Hmm.
Let us never stop worshiping at the God Reagan.
Hmm.
Was that sarcastic enough? Should I get a little more?
Hmm. No, I got you.
I'm just hoping that the listeners will.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's what I do think about. I mean, they're the ones who have not given up control, and not just them. Look
Oh,
who's on like the
traditionalists. Sorry.
climate
Before they were
traditionalists,
called the silent generation, they were called traditionalists because children of this era were
right?
expected to be seen and not heard. Yeah. Oh no, they're
Well,
called
they've made up
silent
for that,
because yeah.
right? But they've made up for all of it,
Yeah.
whatever. But they've stayed traditionalists, that's for sure.
Hmm.
And I mean, and we're not just talking about um, like the Democratic leadership and the Republican leadership. We're talking about how old is that freaking guy from Goldman Sachs? He looks like he's 87 for sure. And
Who?
then there's the one who
Alan
cries on,
Greenspan.
uh, probably, yeah, one of them. Yeah, Alan would probably be one of them. I'm sure he
I'm
is.
sure he's a
And
silent.
then you got, and then you got the other one that's crying on the TV all the time about, I care. The one,
Oh
the one that's
yeah.
that guy with the glasses, and he's like
Hmm.
74. He's like, and he's one of the young ones of what I'm
Hmm.
talking about, like J.P. Morgan and Chase, Manhattan. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Who runs the boards of those companies? Are they young?
Well, there's
Are they
definitely
that
bleed over.
generation?
There's bleed over into these generations, and even people who are, you know, uh, born in one generation. It's about the aesthetic or the mindset, that makes you a boomer, even if you're a millennial or a Gen Xer. You can have that boomer mentality, quote unquote, even though I'm with you. It's not a
I
boomer
don't know what
mentality.
that's
It's a
supposed to be.
traditionalist mentality.
I mean, the boomers were considered the most radical. Okay,
Hmm.
the boomers lived at a time when there were political assassinations in America.
Hmm.
Let's talk about how many we've had since then.
Hmm.
What? See, this is something never talked about. nowhere. So we were radical. We were so radical that so many, I mean, we now know that there were at least three black men, and I believe many more of them that were assassinated,
Hmm.
politically assassinated for their politics of wanting racism in America to stop.
I mean, I'm sure there were hundreds, but yeah, of the high profile
Of
ones we know about.
the
Hmm.
leaders, the ones
Right.
who are driving it, whose energy is
Hmm.
forcing the movement forward, who, you know,
Yeah.
and that they would take them all out just like that and were able to.
Hmm.
And then also a president of the United States and from the same family,
Hmm.
someone who is running for the office of the president of the United States.
Yep. And what? And so,
And so, what is that? What is that time that's not talked about in our history when
well,
all this is going on? And now it seemed like, well, and then the boomers just didn't do anything. Well, you took out all of our leaders.
hmm,
What did you think we were going to be able to do? And some of us still fought the good fight. Not
hmm,
all of us turned into yuppies. Not all of us believed that you could just suck everything out of all of Mother Nature and we'd still be sustainable.
hmm. No, I don't
We've
blame
never
all.
really
Obviously,
been
I don't
able
blame all
to.
boomers. Uh,
No, and I
you
think a
know.
lot of us still feel that way. I mean, a lot of us still believe that we've tried to keep up the good fight,
Hmm.
whether we have or not, whether we've been under some disillusion. But I believe that the silent generation never wanted any good fight. They're the
Well, and
ones
even
who
Bernie is
I
a silent generation guy, so it's not all silent generation. It's not.
mm-mm.
There's no. It's not all of any one group. It's certain
I mean,
ones.
some of them are still liberal.
Hmm. It's certain ones who define the generation. You know.
Or progressive.
Hashtag not all boomers. That's what I would say to that.
Well, that's it. I just feel like that we get blamed a lot for stuff that we may or may
Hmm.
not have done or been in charge of, or they think that we did something with. And that's the thing to say is even before that, then the generations in power
Hmm.
who are running the money, the country, the things like that, like sort of what I was saying the other day when, yes, I knew we needed to get off of fossil fuel. I was talking to people about, we knew this. I'm, I'm in my 20s. I want to get off of fossil fuels.
Hmm.
I'm now in my 60s. I want us to get off of fossil fuels.
Hmm.
But even, and why? Partly because the fossil fuel industry knew themselves because they'd done their own study and they'd let it got leaked out because that was the time when things were not safe either.
Hmm.
Okay, I mean, like that, like things were kind of leaking, we were talking about that, like information just became, I don't know why the flow became easier, but at that time in the 60s it just sort of did. And even into the 70s. And so maybe with television, nightly news, things like that, maybe that was it. And going into, I don't know that it was going into cable anyway. So then anyway, I lost my train of thought.
I hate to say it. I think all generations are guilty of having too much faith in the next generation, and I think there was a lot of hype built up around the millennials, and we millennials are, I think, are just as average as every other generation. You know, I remember growing up, people thought, "Oh, you millennials, you'll fix the world. You'll do all the hard, you know, battles and stuff, and it'll be easy for you because you're all going to be so, you know, activated and, you know, progressive without them saying progressive. That's what they were thinking." And it's like, well, half millennials are idiots just like every other generation. Yeah, half of us are
Well, and I think that
activated, but
that is really a part of it. And until you get the people who are in power, who
hmm,
are what not progressive, which when I say progressive is, I mean you got to move. In my in my belief of my mantra of life and
Mhm.
even death, one must go forward.
Mhm.
You can't really go back. It's just like we can talk all we want about how we would change history, but you really can't. You
Right.
can remake it in a certain way. And we've talked sort of about, yes, history has been rewritten because now scientists have been able to catch up with the theories of what history thought or didn't think.
Mhm.
And that's an ongoing thing. So, and as always, science is looking into how nature is nature because that's all a mystery of
Right.
science.
Right.
So yeah, so that's what I think about, that every generation will need the generation before it to help with it. You can't think
Yes.
that one will ever do it by itself, and nor
Exactly.
did, and and I feel as a sort of a boomer that we did do a lot. And when I look at what happened and how demoralized and just de- smashed, beat up that we
Mhm.
were, even an LBJ is like kind of the shining star because he was a progressive, and I always did think that he was a progressive. But Robert Kennedy would have been much more progressive than him,
Mhm.
even, which would have been much better. Anyway, so um on
Yeah. Well, I
and
think
but he got tainted by the Vietnam War. That's what happened to
right.
LBJ.
But like your
So
point about every generation needs to help the next generation and look to the previous generation to help them. We have to use the tools that were left to us by those previous generations, and obviously Article 5 was pretty much the most progressive thing left by the founders. uh, and and just like the Renaissance harkened back to Hellenist Greece, and just like now we need to harken back to uh, or and the Enlightenment period harkened back to the Renaissance, we now need to go. We need to look back to every past generation, all the way back to the archaic times, and use the tools that we've always had from every generation. Use the best tools that have been left over, and partly we're doing that just naturally through the internet. I think that's very much an archaic tool, because it kind of puts everyone on equal playing field. It puts all ideas on an equal footing, and it lets the best ideas rise to the top. And so I think if we push those best ideas forward, they will propagate. And so if we get people curious about Article 5, they will tell their friends, and it will rise to the surface as a meme. So Article 5 is it's the future.
well, and sort of like, and that's it about the control, and we're deciding, we're seeing the control that's being done in the social media area, arenas,
Mm-hmm.
platforms, whatever you want to say on that, about the algorithms and who gets seen and who doesn't get seen and why you get sent down a rabbit hole. And
Mm-hmm.
the age of those people are not boomers, and they are not silent generation. They are younger. Is that not Facebook? And
You mean the
so
owners
that's
of those companies?
companies, yes,
Yeah, they're probably
who
Gen
have
Xers.
okay, and that's fine with me. I'm not trying to blame, but I'm saying
Yeah.
I don't think, like Zuckerberg, right? I
Mm-hmm.
don't he ain't in my group.
No,
Do you know what I mean? Like,
I don't know what
and
he
I'm
is.
not
I
trying to,
guess he's a Gen Xer, but I don't really know.
and I don't know either. But he's not a boomer, is what I'm saying.
No.
So, and I'm not trying to defend myself with that. It's that this thing like that we were the continuity of that, which is there were just as many people like in the Gen X group that wanted to get rich, and you like how Betos must be, Amazon Prime,
Yeah.
Amazon
Let's see. Okay, Zuckerberg is
Fire.
36. So yeah, he's no, so he's a millennial. He's sort of an older millennial like I am. Or I'm kind of like middle millennial. He's slightly older millennial. Let's see. How old is Jack Dorsey? The Twitter guy, he's 44, so he's Gen X. And how and Bezos is 57, so he's sort of a younger boomer, I guess, right?
Yeah, he'd be right at the end at the boomer,
Yeah, so I mean
if I'm,
there's no
and right at
rule.
the beginning of, or the beginning of the Gen X,
Yeah.
I guess, right?
So I
So
mean
yeah, so that's
Zuckerberg
what I'm
is
sort of saying, and it's all kind of all over the
it's
map.
all over the
I
place
mean,
cuz Zuckerberg is way
yeah.
more like reactionary than Jack Dorsey, I think. I mean, they're neither of them are like progressives, but anyways. Yeah, it's not about
So
age, it's about mindset
uh, it
and
is, and about what what your goals are, and I am glad to see that it is becoming more popular that we have to keep the earth sustainable
mhm
as Homo sapiens. But in but really, that is sort of for a younger generation not to work on so much, but to have more concern with. Not because I didn't try to be concerned with it or
mhm
have or you know things done about it. We were talking about the fossil fuels. But then the fossil fuel company figured out that they could just say, oh no, what came out, that study is just a lie. We're not really hurting the environment. Everything's absolutely fine.
mhm
And they did that, and people believed them of all generations. And it was just easier to keep and maintain things as they go.
mhm
Do you know what I mean? Than anybody, of whether you're a boomer or whether you're a Gen X or a millennial, it's hard to change, to look at,
mhm
oh man, we have all this to, change. And in some ways we do, unfortunately. And
and it's all about
I
once
just
you
wish,
get power, people who when they get into a position where they could change things because they've got power, then do you want things to change now that you're on top? That's the hard position to be in.
well, that's the question that it was being asked about the HR one that will be the Senate one, about the sort of corruption, because what the Democrats are saying, oh, well, now we've learned how to raise money and now you want us to stop. And that's the whole thing, is it seems to be all about raising money. What I want it to be about is winning, but we can't seem to have those two things go together. I mean, even if you raise tons and tons of money, and even if your opponent isn't that good, you know, there were so many, like, that's what, and that's sort of what's happening. Is, let's say someone like Chuck Schumer, who is older, now is backing somebody like Amy McGrath, who's young. Yeah, she's younger, but she's she could be him, or she could be in her politics, or her um, platform, or her real ideas of where she wants things to go.
Mhm
You know what I mean? And that's sort of the idea about how you can hand power to someone younger than you, so you look like you're doing a good thing, like, oh, I'm bringing young people into the fold,
mhm
like the younger are getting some power, but they're really not, you
yeah,
know?
because you've groomed them and
Yes,
you've
made them, yeah,
cloned them into a mini version of yourself.
yeah. So on the Article 5, that's I mean, I think that is it. Without it, we will not be able to keep fascism at
Mhm
bay. It is already at our door. It is on Tucker Carlson's show.
mhm yep. And
He
that
says that the Republicans will have to vote for a fascist
yep.
because the Democrats will have made him. The communists will have made me do it.
Mhm
Being a pagan communist, I'm not going to say the Democrats. Why would the communists made me do it?
mhm. And Article 5 is I mean, it's explicitly a populist feature. I mean, yes, Congress can pass amendments without the states, but they can't ratify it without the states. So change has to be ratified by the states or approved of by the majority of the states, and those.
So it is up to every person in their
Mhm.
state to start dealing on what they want for an Article 5 convention amendment called for. If you wanted
Yes.
to legalize pot, if you wanted to legalize prostitution, if you wanted, however, and it won't do it like that. And you can say it sort of like that, but the real way is you'll say that that the Constitution will no longer prohibit it, or Congress will, no longer be able to prohibit marijuana.
Hmm.
Okay,
And
in the
that's the
states,
easiest
or
one.
it's
And
up to the states.
if we stick to that one, especially, legalize pot. Do it, do it, do it, do it. Legalize marijuana. And you go to your state house and you tell your legislator, I want a constitutional amendment as outlined in Article 5 that.
No, no, we know better than that. We don't want you to go to the state house. We want you to call them. We want you to call
Or
them
go. I
every
say go
day.
too.
And well, yeah, but I want
Or
you to
both.
start before that. I want you to start, or both, if you can. See, our state legislators or my state legislators do not meet very often.
Right.
So if you want to get something going, and Texas, theirs don't meet but every 2 years.
Hmm.
So if you want to get it going for legalizing pot, you've already passed this year by,
Hmm.
because it will be in 2022 that you can do the earliest. So you better start now when it stops. That's what I'm sort of
Hmm.
saying. They're still your state legislator, whether they're meeting or not to vote on an Article 5 call convention, a, a convention call, a
Hmm.
convention call. Sorry, I do that a lot of times. Um, then you can start getting other people on board with it, and they'll know how popular that it is before they even go into
Hmm.
that. And they do meet in committees. Committee meetings go on even if the general legislatures are not in the. So check out yours
And
and
a
what
lot of
they
times they
do.
need to be told what Article 5 is. A lot of state legislators don't even know what it is and don't even realize how powerful they are to the nation. They could actually start a change to the Constitution by proposing state legislation calling for an Article 5 convention. And to the point of the power of Article 5, calling for that state convention doesn't necessarily have to result in a convention, or not, excuse me, yeah, a state's convention or an amendment convention doesn't necessarily have to result in a convention, because it immediately results in pressure on Congress to pass an amendment or propose an amendment. And that's historically how it gets done. You you call for a convention from the states. Congress feels the heat, the pressure, and so they propose the amendment. And either way, it goes back to the states for 3/4 to ratify. And we should probably wrap it up because we've been going for over an hour. So,
You know how it is when you get me on the French Revolution.
mm-hmm. Oh, and as I say that, we started dropping frames again on the stream. So,
All right, so it's keep hope alive.
with Article 5.
There we
Bye
go.
bye.
Bye bye.